Good evening. We are a little delayed. We had a couple technical difficulties, which we resolved. I want to welcome everyone and call the April 15th City Council meeting to order. As a reminder, we still continue to have a remote aspect to our meetings, and so both staff members and members of the public may be participating in tonight's meeting remotely via WebEx. The first item on our agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I invite you to join. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which is one nation, God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda this evening is special business, and this is ID 1593, Administrative Professionals Day Proclamation. And I'd like to invite Stephanie Johnson up to the lectern to receive. I haven't seen Stephanie in a while, so this is kind of a person face to face, so this is kind of fun. Thank you for coming tonight. Whereas Administrative Professionals Day is observed annually in workplaces around the world to recognize the important contributions of administrative supportive staff, and whereas administrative professionals play an essential role in coordinating the office and governmental operations of the City of Issaquah, and whereas administrative professionals are vital contributors in today's team-oriented work environment and are key frontline public relations ambassadors for their organizations. Whereas the work of administrative professionals today requires advanced knowledge and expertise in communications, computer software, office technology, project management, organization, customer service, and other vital office management responsibilities. And most importantly, they have the willingness to learn and accept new challenges. Now, therefore, I, Mary Lou Pauley, the Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do recognize Wednesday, April 24th, 2024, as Administrative Professionals Day in the City of Issaquah. And I invite the community to join me in thanking the city's administrative professionals for their service and outstanding work. Stephanie.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley and Council. I also want to thank all our administrative professionals. This is the one position that we have across every single department in the city. It's the only one that we have across every single department in the city. These folks are our glue. They certainly keep us organized in all these wonderful things that Mayor Pauley recited. This group is also in the last 5 or 6 months getting together and doing some cross-department coordination. So that's really exciting to see in terms of, innovating things across the city to improve things. So thank you, and thank you to the staff. We really appreciate them. Sure.
Wally. We are back from a short recess to work on some different technical difficulties. We think we're in a better place now. The next item under special business today is ID 1680. This is the end of the 2024 legislative session report. And I'd like to invite the city's lobbyist, Shelley Helder, to the lectern. Welcome, Shelley.
Good evening. All right. Well, it is nice to be with you all this evening. Hopefully you're not hearing an echo. Okay. I'm good with it if you're all good with it. Great. Before I jump into tonight's presentation, I just want to call your attention to the fact that there is also a written report included in your council packet. So this evening, I'm going to touch on the highlights, high-level outcomes from the legislative session, but there is, of course, much more that happened. So definitely use that written report as a resource. And if you're going to read it cover to cover, make sure that you are in bed so you can fall asleep. So next slide. So tonight I'm going to cover 4 topics in the update. The first, I'll do an overview of the 2024 session. Then I'll drill down to talk about the outcomes of the city's legislative priorities. I'll cover outcomes from additional legislative issues that are relevant to the city, and then we'll wrap up by talking about next steps. So the 2024 session was the second of the legislative biennium, and the second year is always the short year. It's always 60 days. And it's a short year because the legislature's task is slightly smaller than in the long year. They have to adopt supplemental budgets as opposed to the biennial budgets. And the supplemental budgets are intended to make very small changes to the existing. In addition to adopting the 3 supplemental budgets, they also considered over 1,500 pieces of new legislation. Ultimately, 376 passed into law. And as you can see with that bar chart, that's a comparison of bills introduced compared to bills that have passed over the last 2 years. So last year, since it was a long session, we had more bills introduced than during the 2 short sessions. But as you can see, the numbers are continuing to grow, and I don't expect any change in that pattern. Within the political context, Democrats still held strong majorities in both the House and the Senate, so there was no change there. The new dynamic in the short session was the introduction of 6 initiatives. Initiatives are bills that are sponsored by the people of Washington. When the legislature has initiatives, they have 3 options. They can adopt an initiative as presented. They can adopt an alternative, and then both the original and the alternative go to the voters, or they can do nothing and the initiative goes to the voters. So the legislature chose for 3 of the initiatives to adopt them as presented. That was the parental rights bill, the vehicular pursuits, and I'm not going to go from memory here, state and local income tax ban. The 3 that they chose to do nothing and are therefore going to the voters in November are the repeal of the Climate Commitment Act, the long-term care opt-out, and the capital gains repeal. Next slide. The state has, like I mentioned, 3 budgets: operating, capital, and transportation. The operating is the largest of the 3. It pays for, as you would imagine, all state agency operations. The largest expense within this is the K-12 education system. The February revenue forecast is what was used to determine the capacity of the supplemental budget, and the revenue predicted an additional $1.2 billion compared to when the last budget was adopted. So the supplemental budget allocates an additional $2.1 billion, which brings the biennial budget to $71.9 billion. And it's just helpful to put that in context. That means the biennial budget was roughly $69 million. The supplemental budget is, $69 billion. The supplemental budget was $2 billion. So very small amount. One of the significant outcomes from the supplemental operating budget is the elimination of the local cost share for the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. So previously, cities or any local government agency that is sending a new recruit to the Criminal Justice Training Commission for new recruit training has to pay 25% of that cost. Operating budget eliminates that requirement beginning July 1. So there's a little bit of cost savings for local governments. The capital budget is the smallest of the 3 budgets. It funds public and nonprofit construction projects. The supplemental capital budget was $1.3 billion, and that brings the biennial budget to $10.3 billion. The additional capacity within the capital budget comes primarily from the Climate Commitment Act, federal funds, and the Model Toxics Control account. As you'll notice, there was very limited bonding capacity. So if not for those other 3 sources, there would be very limited investment in the supplemental budget. And because so much of the investment in the capital budget is from the Climate Commitment Act, majority of that is contingent on the outcome of the initiative in November, and that money is kind of held until January of 2025. There was $72.5 million allocated to local community projects. This is the category in the capital budget where local governments and nonprofits compete for funds. That's where the city has historically received funding through. The size of the awards in the supplemental budget year are traditionally very small, and that was no exception this year. There was a little under 1.5 million allocated per legislative district. So within the district, if there were multiple awards, obviously they're on the small end. One of the most notable investments in the capital budget was $127 million for the Housing Trust Fund, and then over $100 million invested in behavioral health facilities around the state. The transportation budget, of course, funds the state's transportation system. That includes the highways, the ferries, active transportation, transit, as well as transportation state agencies that are transportation related, operations for those state agencies. This was by far the most constrained of the three budgets and has been for several years. The supplemental transportation budget allocates an additional $1 billion, so that brings the biennial budget to $14.6 billion. Most of the new spending is directed to just a handful of areas. First is cost overruns on 2 mega projects, specifically the 520 Bridge and 405. Fish barrier removal, state fish barrier removal. Capital improvements to ferries and highway preservation. The new spending comes from federal funds, Climate Commitment Act revenue, and the advancement of Move Ahead Washington. That's the package that was adopted. Move Ahead, they advanced some of the revenues in that package. And again, because so much of the spending in this budget comes from Climate Commitment Act, it's not available until January of 2025 once we know the outcome of the November election or November ballot. I do want to note traditional transportation revenues are down 8% since the biennium began, which is, what is it? I don't have the slide in front of me, I think 65 million. So a rather substantial continuing to decrease. Next slide. So the city had 3 legislative priorities for this short session. The first was to support resources and tools for communities to address their unique housing affordability and availability challenges. So I mentioned the legislature made significant investments in affordable housing, another $127 million for the Housing Trust Fund, as well as, that's on the capital side of things. There's also $34 million within the operating budget for local governments for homeless housing programs and services. And both of these amounts are in addition to the funding that was included in the underlying budget. That has not all been spent, is still out there. Additionally, the legislature made a tweak to the use of the 1406 funds. These are the funds that are a credit against the state sales tax that can be used for affordable housing. Previously, those funds had to be used on housing for individuals with 60% AMI or lower. The bill that they passed this session, Senate Bill 6173, allows those funds to be used for 80% AMI or lower if the projects are for home ownership. So it's providing a little bit more flexibility depending on the particular need of the region or of the city. Another bill is House Bill 1892, and this created the Workforce Housing Accelerator Program. This is a program that will be administered by the Department of Commerce and provides loans to eligible organizations to assist with the development of low-income housing, defined as 50 to 80% of the AMI. So this is an important program because the Housing Trust Fund focuses on housing for 50% AMI or lower, and there isn't a program currently that provides financing tools for the 50 to 80% threshold. The second priority was requesting the state's partnership in transportation, and in 3 areas specifically. First was a request for just general coordination with WashDOT and recognizing that for the agency to be a successful partner with the city, they have to be sufficiently staffed. So in the biennial transportation budget, so in 2023, the legislature cut funding for many vacant positions within the agency. And they indicated that they would restore that funding if the agency indicated that they were going to fill those positions or had need for those positions. So in preparation for the supplemental transportation budget, WashDOT submitted a request for a little over $9 million in vacancy savings restoration. And true to their word, the legislature they honored that request, and in the supplemental budget, there's a little over $9 million to restore that vacancy savings. And that is across 11 different programs within WashDOT. That includes over $3 million for the highway maintenance program and $655,000 for the local programs office. And those were both the full amounts that were requested. I just pulled those two because I know those are two of the ones that the city works with most closely. I will note that this is restoring the vacancy savings. It's not necessarily adding new capacity, but it is honoring the agency's request. Within this category, the second is we wanted to continue to elevate the need for the state's partnership for an additional crossing of I-90, both to relieve congestion within the city as well as on I-90. We didn't have a specific request for this item this legislative session, but we kept it on the agenda and we wanted to continue to keep it on legislators' radar for years to come. And then the third is the widening and safety improvements on State Route 18. So right as the legislative session began, we heard that the Highway 18 project had jumped in cost from roughly $650 million to as high as $1.8 billion. And this was just one of several mega projects in the state that received this news. The timing was a little bit different for the Highway 18 project. Every project's on a different timeline. Budget writers made it really clear, even before the Highway 18 numbers came in, that they were not going to have capacity to address the massive cost increases around the state. And so when we heard these numbers, both city as well as the partners of the Southeast Area Legislative Transportation Coalition, or CLTC, we made sure that our message to the legislature was really clear. Retain all the funding that you've already allocated to the corridor and provide direction to WashDOT to keep moving forward with the project with the resources that are available. We wanted to ensure that there was no delay in the delivery of the project. So the supplemental budget does that. It retains all the funding that's previously awarded, and it specifies that it's for phase 1 of the project. So phase 1 will widen Highway 18 from Raging River, which is where the current interchange widening project ends. So it'll widen it from Raging River up to Tiger Mountain Summit, and it'll install medians to divide the highway. And it'll also construct 2 roundabouts at Issaquah Hobart Road for turnaround purposes. The budget also provided specific guidance to WashDOT to have the Capital Projects Review Advisory Board, CPARB, provide recommendations on WashDOT's procurement method, both for this Highway 18 project as well as several other mega projects in the state. And the intent of that review is to provide the assurance that WashDOT's procurement methods are the most efficient and that they're resulting in the best benefit for the dollar. And then the proviso language also says that if the bids for a project come back greater than 5% or 10 million, whichever is lower, more than the engineer's estimate, then WashDOT has to pause the contract and report to the legislature. So there's a little bit of a kind of a backstop in place so that the legislature doesn't get stuck like they have previously with projects proceeding and there not being sufficient funding. So we just heard in a briefing from WashDOT last week that CPARB is already reviewing the Highway 18 procurement plan. They expect to issue an RFP in August, and so that is still on schedule with what they had previously thought was possible. And then without getting too far down the road, both figuratively and metaphorically, I'll just note that phase 2 of the project, which is going to be Tiger Mountain Summit, Issaquah Hobart Road, has design funding based on what the legislature has already allocated. but it will need construction funds. So there's going to be another large ask. I think the current estimate is $1.2 billion in order to fully solve the problem on Highway 18. The third and final priority for this session was a capital budget request for $200,000, which was made in partnership with the Cougar Mountain Zoo. And this was a request for an indoor educational space. And this was fully funded in the supplemental capital budget due to the support both of the 5th District legislators, but also the 41st District. Specifically, Senator Wellman sponsored the budget request in the Senate, and that's the reason that we were able to secure the full amount for this request. And it's not typical that legislators sponsor a project that's outside their district, even though it does benefit the region. So it's really grateful that Senator Wellman was willing to do that. Next slide. So in addition to the city's top priorities, you all identify other issues that you care about, and those are listed, the city's positions are listed in the policy manual. These are issues that may or may not come up throughout the legislative session, but it's issues that are important to the city. So again, the complete list of things that are relevant in the policy manual and happened during this legislative session are included in the written report, but tonight I'm just going to cover 3. On the topic of public safety, I mentioned the legislature passed Initiative 2113, which allows a police officer to engage in a vehicular pursuit if there's reasonable suspicion to believe that the individual has violated the law. The legislature also allocated funding for a report related to vehicular pursuits, and part of the report will include recommendations for what data should be collected from all agencies so that the legislature has consistent and uniform information to begin or to consider future policies around vehicular pursuits. That report is due June 30th, 2025. The legislature also passed House Bill 2384, and this makes several changes to the use of automated traffic safety cameras. This was in direct response to the record number of traffic-related fatalities last year, number that's continuing to grow. And just the recognition that traffic cameras change drivers' behaviors. So the intent of the legislation is to increase local government's ease of cameras as a tool to help promote traffic safety. Within the categories of climate change and environmental stewardship, the legislature passed House Bill 2301, and this makes several changes to organic materials management. Probably the most notable impact for local governments is that bin colors for solid waste collection must be standardized across all jurisdictions. There's lots of other changes in there if you care a lot about organic material management. The supplemental capital budget also allocates a little over $20 million for fish barrier removal. This is the grant program for local governments to address fish barriers. And then there's also the $20 million is in addition to the $40 million, which is in the underlying budget. This is the largest amount of money that's been allocated to this program since it was created. And while that $20 million is essentially already counted for because it funds projects that have previously been rank ordered, it's a really good indication that there's a growing understanding of how much funding is needed to address local culverts. There's also an additional $25 million for the Salmon Recovery Funding Board, again, in addition to the amount in the underlying budget. And then finally, there was $45 million included for the Clean Buildings Performance Grants for Tier 1 buildings. All 3 of those grant programs that I just mentioned, that funding is all contingent on the initiative failing. And then last but not least, the capital budget includes $2 million for the Department of Ecology to continue working with Eastside Fire and Rescue on the PFAS pilot cleanup. Next slide. So with all of that information about what happened this legislative session, what comes next? What do we do now? So my recommendation is always to begin with gratitude. Our state legislators put their lives on hold in a short session for 60 days, and they're doing the work that's necessary for our state to function. And so I just encourage you all, as you interact with them, to thank them for their service to the city, to the district, but also to our state. There are, as I mentioned, 376 laws that passed, and so state agencies will be making changes in order to implement all these new laws. Some of them do impact local governments, and so city staff will have to implement new laws. There's also several grant programs that are open for application right now. I mentioned just 3 of them on the last slide within the climate category. There's the legislature is continuing to put money into grant programs, and while it's great that there's so much money out there, it takes staff time to complete the applications. And so my encouragement for cities is to, as discouraging as it is, to keep applying for grants. If there is a funding need, the legislature needs to know that programs are going to be oversubscribed, so that there's more people interested in the grants than they have funding available. And if a city isn't successful in receiving an award through a grant program, you still stand a better chance of getting that funding through an earmark if you've applied to the program. If you go to the state and ask for funding and they say, well, we have a grant program, did you apply for it? And you say no, it's a much harder ask. It's a harder ask for them to make of their peers as well. Like, well, why should your community jump ahead of these others? So it's just, this is my encouragement, as tedious as it can be, to look for grant programs if there is a city need for a project or a program. In preparation for the 2025 session, of course, we'll want to develop a new biennial legislative agenda. We typically begin that process in the fall, but I would just encourage you all now to start thinking about what the city's priorities should be, because between now and the fall, there's, of course, an election cycle, and the entire House, half of the Senate will be up for election. Every legislator in the city's delegation will have to run for office. We'll have a new governor next fall. There's several other statewide offices that are open. And then, as I mentioned, there's 3 initiatives, and all 3 will have an impact on state budgets next year. So there is a lot that will be different for the 2025 session. A lot of uncertainty, but we do know that come 2025, the state will need to adopt operating, capital, and transportation budgets, and that they'll be looking for ways to increase efficiencies across the board. So any ideas that we have and opportunities we have to take advantage of the 2025 session, that's what we'll want to do. So with that, I am done and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shelley, for that great summary. Does council have any questions at this time? Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for doing such an amazing job during this session this year. It was, we did benefit a lot from the knowledge that you bring about all of these issues. And as you noted, there is additional information for those who would like to read a little bit deeper in the package. But thank you very much, Shelley.
Thank you.
Nice to see you this evening. Thanks for coming. The next item of business this evening is audience comments, and at this time, members of the public may address council in person or virtually. Those who signed up in advance to make comments will be called on first, and if you are joining us virtually and you would like to make comments, please take time to raise your virtual hand or send our host a chat message. If you're in the room and you did not sign up, I will still ask for other speakers before we close this portion of the meeting. There are also several public hearings this evening. AB 8667 is a public hearing on the City Hall Northwest surplus property. AB 8791, Central Issaquah Pioneer Program, multifamily tax exemption, is the second public hearing. Comments on these items should be made under those specific public hearings that occur later in the meeting. City Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak for general audience comments or indicated a desire to speak this evening?
Yes.
Thank you. For those making comments tonight, you're invited to address the council regarding matters that are directly related to Issaquah's programs, projects, services, or events. Please direct your comments to the whole council and not individuals. And while this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. When you are recognized for virtual attendees, please unmute your microphone, or if you're in this room with us, please step up to the lectern in front of the council. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. If you're attending virtually and you don't respond after your name or phone number is called, or if you lose your connection, the meeting will still need to proceed, and you're encouraged to rejoin the meeting if you're able. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. Public comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process, and the city takes comments seriously. We thank everybody in advance for taking the time tonight to address us. City Clerk, can you please identify the first person who signed up to speak?
Yes, Alex Zimmerman.
Mr. Zimmerman, if you push the button in the center of the microphone to get the red light, we can hear you.
Oh, red light. I like red color. Hi, my name is Alex Zimmerman, and I am president of Stand Up America US. I'm a chair of this party. I bring this party to life. So I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat, I'm not independent. I'm have my party, so I want to explain this to you because everything what is happening in your city very important to me, and I explain to you why. For last more than 10 years, I almost 14-time candidate. Candidate, you know what is mean? What is it? Include U.S. senator, state senator, governor, in another dozen positions. Yeah, so everything what is happening exactly in East Side, very important for me because I live in Bellevue almost for 40 years. And for 30 plus years, I go to council and speak. Yeah. Bellevue, Mesley Island, Redmond, Kirkland. I talked to you 20 years ago, yes, too. Yeah. Situation what is we have right now is exactly what is I want to speak about is condition what is right now have everybody. Include people who live in Issaquah, because we in same basket. What has happened in Bellevue reflect in Issaquah. What has happened in Olympia reflect in Issaquah too. We cannot stay in separate. Problem what is we have right now is this problem what is I fighting for many years, because I think everything what is happening right now, you look to me like a pure degree of fascism or dictator. Of totalitarianism, name not important. Important what's going on. So my opinion about this, and I talking about this for many years, we have what is I call Dori dem Nazi fascist junta who control us for many years. For example, 40 years come from Olympia, yes. But when we're talking about local situation, what is in King County? So King County exactly for last 10 years, totally control one-party system. In one-party system, everybody knows it's a classic, it's a fascism.
Mr. Zimmerman, excuse me, can you talk to something that is on our agenda this evening, or a city program or policy?
Ma'am, by law, I can speak about something what is very important for city. Your city, very important what is I'm talking. I give you example what is going on, because what is going on now is very critical. So I'm so sorry, so you interrupt me. Maybe you don't understand what is happening. Because Issaquah is not in the moon or in Mars, you know what it means. So I repeat you again. Everything what is happening around reflect everything. For this, I give you classic example what has come from Bellevue, because Bellevue right now absolutely unique place. What is don't have analogy in state Washington. Bellevue Council right now totally support corporation and exactly Amazon. So what does this happen? I give you a couple examples. Average salary in Bellevue, $200,000. You understand what does that mean? Average salary, $200,000. It's statistic. It's not my mentality. Yeah. So when average salary in Bellevue, $200,000, price for everything will be go up, include Bellevue, Mesley Island, Kirkland, Redmond, in exactly Issaquah too, because we in package in east side. So my question right now to 500,000 people, what is live in east side, you know what is mean? We need stopping this. We cannot give Bellevue absolutely power so they can do in everything what is they want in exactly council, who elect not legally. Why? Because I last year candidate for Bellevue Council too, position number 3. Because 90% of people in Bellevue never vote for them. They are junta, a classic junta, what is doing with city everything, but they not only doing with city Bellevue, this reflect everybody right now, and I go speak everybody, and I have statistic from all King County right now, we reflect everything. Rent, for example, jump like a crazy. It will be for another year or two, another 30 or 40%. Yeah, because Bellevue have controlling everything. But political what is how Bellevue so dangerous, and I want to speak to you guys, when we not stand up, it don't stop on this fascism, what is controlling pandemic, Nazi fascist party, a junta, you know what it mean? Life will be a nightmare. I live 40 years. Yeah, 40 years is enough for understand. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. City Clerk, who else has signed up to speak this evening?
We have a few members of the public with us virtually, but I don't see any of them indicating to speak at this time.
Elizabeth, would you like to speak tonight? Just wanted to check in. Thank you. An item. Okay. Thanks. So nobody indicating online. Then we are good. So thanks to those that are with us tonight. As a reminder, you can always write comments to your city council at any time using the citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov email address. The next item of business this evening is the consent calendar, and I do not have any remarks on tonight's consent calendar items. Are there any committee chairs or chair designees who would like to report on any of the consent calendar items? Seeing some negatives there. The consent calendar was distributed to council in advance. If authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
They have.
Thank you. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Not seeing any indication. Is there a motion?
Yes. I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar as presented. Is there any council discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously, 7-0. Our next item of business this evening is we're going to move on to the public hearings, and the first one will be AB 667, the City Hall Northwest surplus property. The item tonight is to conduct the public hearing, and I'd like to invite Administrative Services Director Autumn Monahan to make the presentation. Welcome, Autumn.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Autumn Monahan. I'm the Administrative Services Director. I'm here tonight to talk about our proposal for the City Hall Northwest surplus. And apologies, Jeannie wasn't able to make it in person tonight, so you get me. So the purpose tonight is to conduct a public hearing, review our recommendations for surplus of the property, and then forward a resolution for council action on May 6th. Some background. So the council adopted our surplus real property policy in the fall of 2022. This is the first property that we will be proposing to surplus under this new policy. It really defines a process and evaluation criteria for us as we go through this process. The surplus was first initiated by city staff and then affirmed by the council at your June 5th, 2023 council meeting. We then presented our proposal and recommendation to the Services, Safety, and Parks Committee on March, just last month. There were no changes and a recommendation to bring this to the full council for a public hearing. And the notice of this public hearing was, as required in our new policy, was made via the Seattle Times. We mailed to nearby property owners. We've emailed an interested parties list and listed it on our website. So a little background on the property of City Hall Northwest. It is 1.28 acres located at 1775 12th Avenue Northwest. It's a 2-story office building, about 25,000 gross square feet that was constructed in 1983. The city purchased the property for administrative purposes in 1990. King County assesses the value of the property at $3.7 million, and the property is part of our Essential Issaquah plan. A quick summary of our surplus report. So the current use is underutilized. The facility was mostly closed to staff in 2020 just due to the cost of the upkeep of the building, poor condition, and also a lot of remote work that was happening during the pandemic. The current condition is poor with both functional and infrastructure deficiencies. The annual O&M costs are anywhere between $60,000 and $85,000 per year plus staff time. Capital reinvestment, the near-term capital costs would be about $2.5 million to reopen, while longer-term costs would be on the order of more of about $9 million. There's no public benefit identified or revenue that we're currently receiving. There is potential annual tax revenue estimated at $3,000 to $30,000, and there's no historic value to the property. As far as restrictions on the site, the zoning and land use changes are needed to match the surrounding Central Issaquah designation, which I'll talk about here in a moment. Along with rezoning and surplusing the property, other city uses that were considered as part of our assessment were constructing a new facility on site for administrative staff, and then surplusing and selling to another agency or a nonprofit. So our recommendation is to consider the property for surplus and then approve both the rezone application and comprehensive plan amendment underway to change the land use and the zoning to match the surrounding Central Issaquah parcels. So what that means is that we're proposing the land use change from community facilities to mixed use, and the zoning from community facilities to urban core. We are also recommending to dispose of the property, conduct an appraisal following the rezone and the comprehensive plan updates, and then list the property on the MLS and negotiate a purchase and sale agreement. As far as special conditions for deposition that we are proposing that we use the profits to support other city facility needs that are upcoming, and that we transfer ownership of a sewer force main serving the property as part of the purchase and sale agreement. As far as options, you can provide minor changes and we can proceed with a surplus resolution for council adoption on May 6th, or instruct staff to make substantial changes and we can return to committee. As far as timing and next steps, tonight is the public hearing with a proposed council action on May 6th. And then comes the other things I've talked about, the proposed rezone and then the proposed comp plan update that would happen later this year. We would then work on an appraisal with hopes of selling the property early next year. So once again, our recommendation, conduct the public hearing and then adopt the proposed surplus resolution for the City Hall Northwest property on May 6th. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Autumn. Councilmember Martz, Chair of Services, Safety and Parks. And is there any comments you'd like to summarize from the committee's recommendation on this item?
No, I think that the staff report, it was a not very controversial topic, so the staff covered it well.
I will now open the public hearing at 7:53 p.m. And again, just remind folks, if you are online virtually and you'd like to make a comment, raise your virtual hand or send the host a chat message. If you're here in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for further speakers before closing this portion of the meeting. City Clerk, have we had anyone sign up for this public hearing?
No.
Okay, Elizabeth, is this one of the projects you'd like to talk to? Come on up. I'm going to get you to push the button in the center.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
My name is Elizabeth Maupin, and I've been around Issaquah since the 1980s. And sometime, a couple of decades ago, the city granted a permit to Talus, and Talus was supposed to put in some low-income housing, which they determined that they weren't going to do, and they gave the city $1 million for a place similar to the Together Center, which the city never found a site for. This is a site. It's close to transportation. It's close to the Motel 6, which you're using for a shelter. It's close to shopping. When you planned to build next to the transit center, that lower floor wasn't big enough to do a comprehensive services area. This place is big enough. I'm recommending that the city not sell the property, but repurpose the property for something that we have been asking for a couple of decades at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Not seeing anyone else in the room. City Clerk, has anyone online indicated a desire to speak?
No, not for this hearing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Does the council have any objection to my closing the public hearing? Okay, we will be closing it at 7:56 p.m. Does the council have questions? Not seeing any questions. This item will return on the May 6th council agenda for action. Does the city council have any direction on whether they would like to see this return on consent calendar or regular business? Thoughts? Council President?
I would suggest regular business. It is a large dollar amount.
Any other thoughts or general consensus with what Council President said? I'm seeing a lot of head nods. Hey, thank you. Also under public hearings tonight, we have AB 8791, the Central Issaquah Pioneer Program, multifamily tax exemption. And the item before council tonight is to conduct the public hearing again. At the March 18th council meeting, the City Council established the Pioneer Program in the city's land use code and scheduled a public hearing for the multifamily tax exemption component of the program. That hearing is occurring tonight. I'd like to invite Economic Development Manager Jen Davis-Hayes to make a presentation. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is Jen Davis-Hayes, Economic Development Manager, and we are here to talk about the multifamily tax exemption as part of the Pioneer Program. So the purpose is to hold this presentation, or to hold this public hearing, sorry. And we're looking for, after the public hearing, to forward this item to City Council for a decision on May 6th, 2024. Do we know this doesn't work, this screen? It's not on. Okay, maybe it's just not on. That's why I'm like, I don't know where I am. Sorry. Okay, nobody's had it on. Okay, so as you know, we like to show you where any of the projects that we work on with housing, where it is in the continuum. The Pioneer Program and the MFTE is looking at these end on the right with affordable rental housing ownership and market rate. The next slide, you have all been on the journey for the past year to talk about the Pioneer Program. We really appreciate your support in adopting the Pioneer Program in March of 2024. Throughout this process, we discussed the MFTE at each item and provided more information and came to our proposal tonight. The presentation you're going to see tonight is very similar, just with new details about the Pioneer Program, as you saw for the High Street collection. So this, again, provides some background about the MFT program. We currently have 2 sites now, 2 residential targeted areas, Tibbetts Valley TOD targeted area and the High Street collection. And we are looking tonight for a recommendation for the 8-year MFTE for this program. where the Central Issaquah Pioneer Program MFT would be eligible. It's hard to define by roadways, but this is basically urban core in Central Issaquah, including the vertical mixed-use overlay, as well as the mixed-use zone within Central Issaquah. And to give you, again, more background about the MFTE, again, this was similar to what you've seen in the High Street Collection conversation, is that these are the rules around what's eligible for MFTE. So we are, above 4 residential units, and we're looking at the 8-year exemption. So during that time, the land and any commercial property can be taxed. And again, we're not looking at the 12-year. And the city has the ability to designate this. These are the criteria, and we believe we have met all these criteria, looking at increasing multifamily residential opportunities in Central Issaquah, like we've discussed throughout the Pioneer Program discussion. The average median income we'll be looking at, as you may recall, during the Pioneer Program discussion, we looked at having 2 options for the developers, one at 60% and one at 80% AMI. So this outlined block here shows the level of income for families from size 1 to 8 people, of who would be eligible to move into the community new units. And again, with MFTE, you're aware that the multifamily tax exemption is for every single portion of the property tax for the residential piece of that. And so that is not just the city, but that's also these other entities that would be exempt during that 8 years. But at the end of 8 years, all of the entities would begin to collect on the new assessed value. Speaking of assessed values, so we looked at a financial analysis to see how this would impact all those jurisdictions. The assumptions are outlined here, assuming about 300 units. And this is an analysis that was done by Arch with their financial model. So just to remind you, it's not going to be exact numbers because a project could be less than 300, a little bit more, what it's actually assessed for at the time, but also what the last assessed value of that property was, if it was half built, if it was, more than half built and close to being complete, but that would be the percentage of the project that could continue on in our tax rolls. And so if you want to go to the next slide, this shows analysis for the city. Again, this is not reduced revenue. This is foregone revenue. We're talking about $34,033.8 per year for the 8-year total for the city at $270,000. And again, for the entire 8 years, we're looking at about $3 million foregone revenue. So again, after this public hearing, we will come back to you on May 6th for a decision, and then can continue to go out with the Pioneer Program details and working with our community planning and development staff to implement the program and market it to property owners and developers who are interested in providing housing in our Central Issaquah zones that are important to access our amenities. And we will also be partnering with Arch to do the annual multifamily tax exemption reporting requirements to the state. And that is it.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to open the public hearing at 8:03 p.m. And again, if you're joining with us virtually, this would be the time that you would raise your hand or send our host a message. And if anyone is in the room that has not signed up, we'll make sure that we get you up to speak. So clerk, has anyone signed to speak or indicated a desire to speak online?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you want me to reread the? No. Okay, there we go. So who is signed up?
So we have Alex Zimmerman signed up to speak, but I don't see that he is physically in the room with us. Then we have Brian Runberg, who's with us online. Brian, I'm making you a panelist now, so you should have the option to unmute and can choose to turn your video on. Brian, it's your time to make comments. Brian, I'm going to try you one more time. Would you like to make comments at this time? Okay, Brian, we have another individual who'd like to make comments, so I'm going to go ahead and move to them, and then we'll check back in with you. So the next person who would like to make comments is also attending virtually, Jesse Clausen. Jesse, I'm making you a panelist now. You should be able to unmute and can choose to turn your video on.
Can we see if they can message you, City Clerk, and see if it's another WebEx
Yeah,
difficulty?
okay, so just to do a quick test here, Chief Schwan, I see that you just joined us. Would you be willing to try speaking? Okay, so we can't hear anyone on WebEx. Okay, thank you. So we might need to do some quick troubleshooting here. We might need to take a brief at ease.
Okay. 5 minutes at ease? Let's try it.
I can call back in on my phone. Maybe I'll try that. Maybe just go to Jesse. Oh, you can hear me? Okay. Okay. Shall I go? Okay. So, I don't know how you're hearing me quite right, but my name's Brian Runberg. I'm representing the Red Robin property in Pickering Place, the Urban Core, as you've heard before. I'm speaking here in support of the MFT program. Most importantly, it's a great tool. It's been successfully used throughout numerous cities throughout the state. Promotes housing where it's needed most, for dense urban centers such as this in the Urban Core. There's a lot of benefits to that, light rail, etc. The property tax exemption is quite finite and limited to 8 years. However, the expanded tax base provides for the new housing lives on for the life of the project. Incentivizing 2 pioneer projects such as proposed, they're each going to be roughly $100 million. Where this density is needed most is most important, and will significantly add to the local economy in many ways. Beyond and even during those first 8 years of reduction in construction or in traffic congestion, construction, the permitting permits as well. But importantly, the front loading this financial offset is where it's most needed for these projects. They're significant to get off the ground, to get underway, helps them be financially stabilize the properties in the initial years as they're leasing up. And I know other organizations such as Eco Northwest has highlighted and shared with council the importance to utilize this MFT program as an important tool for responsible urban growth. So we appreciate your support on MFT tonight. Thank you.
Scared to try. Is it Jessica next? Jesse. Sounds good.
MFTE program. You've heard from Jen tonight about what MFTE does, and you've obviously passed it for a very small section of Issaquah. One of the primary goals of the MFTE program is to increase the supply of affordable housing by offering tax exemptions to developers who set aside a portion of their units for low or moderate income residents. This program helps make housing more accessible to a broader range of people. It also is an incentive that will increase density in the place where you want it, in the central Issaquah area, where you have already planned for density. Light rail is coming. and you want to incentivize as much as possible the multifamily housing to go there. Obviously, there's an environmental benefit to concentrating development in an urban area in central Issaquah. It will reduce the need for long commutes. The bus station is right there, the bus center, as well as light rail. It preserves green spaces outside of Issaquah and in the rural areas, and it promotes sustainable transportation options. And it stimulates the construction industry. So by incentivizing the construction of multifamily housing, the MFTE program can help stimulate the construction industry, create jobs, and create economic activity. And this will have positive ripple effects throughout the local economy. I would say, I know there's been discussion previously about some of the potential tax issues related to MFTE. And while the residential improvement on the multifamily building is not taxed for 8 years, the underlying land still is taxed, and that assessment still does go up. So there is property tax being received by the city and the various tax authorities, and the city will receive construction sales tax and other sales tax from new residents. So it's not overall, a net zero tax situation for those 8 years. The city will actually see a benefit with other taxes as well. So we are supportive of the MFTE program. We think this is crucial to implementing the Pioneer program. And so we hope you will be in support of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. City Clerk, I'm going to see if Elizabeth in the room would like to speak to this item, and if you can let me know if there's anybody else online that might want to speak. Come on up, Elizabeth.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm excited that you're planning to do something around transit-oriented development. And I have a couple of concerns. One is this MFTE is for 8 years. After 8 years, when the taxes go up, will the people who are there with low income find that they can no longer afford to stay there? Okay, that's reassuring. The people who most need to be near transit are people who have mobility issues. Please make sure that what you construct will include apartments on ground level for people with mobility issues. They will use the transit. They are dependent on the transit. And if among the low-income people who are near transit, you have a number of elders, consider parking. Elders may not drive, but they have people coming to them, like home care aides and people who deliver food and so on. There needs to be some visitor parking that's there. Otherwise, they really get stuck and emergency people can't get to them. So those are some of the thoughts I have about transit-oriented development. It's a great thing, but you still need some parking, and you need to make it available not just to the rich people who can afford cars and to get every place and may or may not use transit, but specifically for people who are most likely to use transit. That's the biggest benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. City Clerk, one last time. Anybody online that also would like to speak this evening?
No.
Thank you. Does council have any objection to my closing of the public hearing? Not seeing any. That public hearing is closed at 8:18 p.m. Council, do you have any questions? Councilmember, our Deputy Council President.
So just a clarification. for the folks at home that maybe could not see that chart, is my sound okay? Oh,
Sounds
good. You said that, Jen, you said the 8-year total foregone revenue was 3 million. That's over all taxing districts, right?
Yes,
That
thank
is
you.
not the city's portion.
Correct, thank you.
Right. I just want to clarify that for the folks who are watching, hopefully watching on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen, I wonder also if you could just provide a little information for one of the questions that was asked during public comment about once the MFT goes away, how are those affordable units managed?
That's a great question. So the affordable units will continue to be affordable for the lifetime of the project. So at 8 years, the developers no longer have that, or 9 years, the developers no longer have the tax exemption, but they're still required to provide at the same level for the lifetime of the project.
So this item, are there any other questions? This item will return on the May 6th council agenda for action. Some direction on whether you would like it on the consent calendar or regular business. Regular business. That's why I'm seeing lots of head nods. Thank you. The next item, Jen, thank you very much. The next item today would normally be regular business, but there are no items. We just had a couple of public hearings this evening. So we're going to move to committee and regional reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Joe.
Madam Mayor, thank you. The Cascade Water Alliance board meeting, which was originally scheduled for April 24th, has been canceled. However, I would like council members to put a date on their calendar, June 27th. Cascade Water Alliance is celebrating their 25th anniversary. It'll be at Maidenbauer Center, 11:30, a lunch event. If you could make it to that event, that would be great. The one 5 years ago was a wonderful event and a great celebration of the work that Cascade Water Alliance has been doing for now 24 years. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall.
Sounds like a fun event. For Eastside Fire and Rescue, the last meeting of the Board of Directors was last Thursday, April 11th at 4 p.m. at our headquarters on Newport Way. Short meeting. Two of the things that I want to bring up were that we just got a quick update and kind of presentation from some staff at Eastside Fire and Rescue about the history of DEI efforts at Eastside Fire and Rescue. And there's a little flyer that they provided all of us. I'll just pass down the dies here if anyone would like to look at it. Also, if anyone's listening in and would like to see this, I'm happy to scan it to you. Just email citycouncil@issaquah.gov and we can get that to you. The other thing was that we established an ad hoc committee. I think I mentioned this previously, an ad hoc committee to update how we evaluate the fire chief, make his performance metrics a little more aligned with what's visible to the board. And our next meeting is scheduled for May 9th, Thursday, May 9th at 4 p.m. at our headquarters. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Hunt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Tuesday, April 2nd, the City Council's Planning, Development, and Environment Committee met. We had one item, which was COM 21, local amendments related to wildfire and the Wildlands Urban Interface Code of the State Building Code. The code changes. There was a recommendation to revise a current code that we had adopted when that was the recommendation, or when that was what had been adopted by the State Building Code Council. They, after we took action, reversed that action, and so the recommendation of both our emergency staff as well as the development and planning staff, and also Eastside Fire and Rescue was there. They recommend aligning with the State Building Code Council. There were some issues, also potential conflicts between different parts of the code that they felt they needed to work out, such as the energy and insulation requirements for energy efficiency and the new building code as it relates to fire prevention. And so the recommendation is to align with the State Building Code Council, and then there will be a number of things that will be worked out through the state legislative process and then through the State Building Code Council. So the committee, we had a lot of questions about that, what was possible, and ultimately we did agree with the recommendation, And we also discussed a lot about would it be possible to adopt parts of it that we expect are going to be in the final code, and you can't do a mix and match, and it didn't make sense. So we did not ultimately go with that. We had 2 representatives from Eastside Fire and Rescue who talked about that they have a full-time person who's working on wildfire prevention, and they are working with cities, including ours, to let homeowners know about voluntary things they can do to prevent wildfire and to harden their homes, to protect their homes against wildfire. And we had a discussion as well about the city could do more to work with HOAs to let them know these code changes are likely coming. These are things that are going to be required. We are now at an elevated risk level, and we'll be getting more information with that when there's new maps that are drawn. But, you know, with climate change, we are at an elevated risk level. And so we had a discussion about what we could do to get ahead of that. And ultimately, the recommendation from the council, which was, or from the committee rather, was to have this on an item for the committee of the whole in May, where we can talk about what emergency management things we can do operationally to let our community know what they can do to protect against wildfire, and to take steps to be ready and to harden their homes against fire. So that will be in May, and that will be at a committee of the whole. And then after that, there will need to be an action taken by the council to roll back the the changes that have been made that are no longer aligned with the State Building Code Council. So I expect that when that does come back, I can briefly remind council about this, because it is a very complicated set of events that led us to this place. The next meeting of the Council Planning, Development, and Environment Committee will be May 7th, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Councilmember Ray?
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. The Mobility and Infrastructure Committee met on April 10th, and there was one item on the agenda. It was it's so hard to change what you want to call things. 0009 Squawk Mountain non-motorized improvement project related to the landscaping part of the street standards. There have been some issues that have arisen when we started to look at this project related to our street standards. To conform with the street standards would require the removal of many, I think it was 179 mature trees, and would also put the long-term health of another probably 50 trees in jeopardy because of what would be required. The question to the committee was whether to modify the street standards to provide more protection for trees in critical areas, and then to proceed with public involvement on the Squawk Mountain non-motorized project ahead of changes to the street standards. There was support for making adjustments to the street standards and then sharing the design alternatives with the community, with the assumption that the council would consider amendment to street standards that will provide more flexibility to protect existing trees in critical areas. This is an ongoing discussion with many touch points over this year, with action probably not anticipated until early 2025. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Ray. Councilmember Mertz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee met online on Wednesday, April 10th at 7 p.m. Some of the major topics that we covered included a long conversation on public defender caseload standards. The Washington State Office of Public Defense is looking at changing the caseload standards. This would have substantial financial impact on municipalities, including our own. They are taking public comment. They have listening sessions in April and I believe May. So SCA did not have a particular action item, but this was more of an informational session and also hearing back. So I conveyed this from our city on potential impact there. It's a complicated topic because we have seen some pushing down of what would otherwise be felonies in the higher court system, which has been busy. So they sort of stuff things down as gross misdemeanors, which then increases the workload on our courts and also potentially moves felonies gross misdemeanors. So, there's not enough money anywhere, but there's a real question about whether these standards need to change or not, and the topic that cities should be educated on. We got an update on the Regional Homelessness Authority. We had a discussion of the Emergency Medical Services Levy renewal process, which is going to be coming forward. We get a lot for a little. With the rates are very low. We have the by far the highest heart attack survival rates associated with our emergency medical services in King County of anywhere in the United States. So really an amazing system, thank goodness. And I'll just mention there's a bit of a happy sad. Brian Perry, SCA's policy director for the last 8 years, is following his old boss Deanna Dawson up to or down to Olympia with AWC. But it's just been, I just have to say personally, a complete joy to work with Brian these last 8 years. He's really good at herding cats and explaining complicated topics to very busy elected officials. The Council Services Safety and Parks Committee meeting for this month, which otherwise would be held tomorrow, has been canceled. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Deputy Council President.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. On April 11th, I chaired the Eastside Human Services Forum, and we previewed the upcoming forums. And I hope you've all seen the invitation to the first one, which is on April the 25th from 3:30 to 5. And this is our first forum of 2024. It will focus on services provided to refugees and asylum seekers. And we will have a panel that includes Pastor Jan Bolerjack of the Tukwila Riverton United Methodist Church, which is where all of the refugees, or not all of them, but a huge number have been coming in for the past year. And also Paul Lawali from Friends of Youth, who will be talking about their unaccompanied youth refugee services. Khizr Sharif, co-founder of MAPS, the Muslim Association of Puget Sound, and we will have a representative of the Afghani diaspora. So I think it'll be a really excellent panel, and I encourage everyone to register. For anybody who needs the link to register for that event, just let me know. I'll be glad to get it to you, but you should have received, hopefully you received it. And then on April 12th, I chaired the Eastside Transportation Partnership. We heard from the new interim Sound Transit CEO, Jaron Sparman. Turns out that Mr. Sparman is an Issaquah resident, which we were, yay. And so he was introduced to all of us and gave remarks, which was very nice. We also heard from Paul Cornish from Sound Transit, provided a really interesting overview of the Sound Transit Bus Rapid Transit Project, which is expected to be fully operational by 2026. And it will connect Tacoma all the way to Linwood along the 405 corridor. So it's going to be definitely a benefit to the east side. It will be partially integrated with the east side two-line light rail. And early station construction is already underway on 405 near Kirkland's 85th Street off-ramp. A lot of the construction will be taking place next year. And as I said, it should be, they're hoping that it'll be operational in 2026. So it's really an exciting project. And then the final Regional Transit Committee will meet Wednesday. And the agenda has a report on Metro Safety Program, which has been a very great interest to us, and the MetroFlex and Van programs. So I'm looking forward to that meeting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Deputy Council President. Council President.
Thank you. The Puget Sound Growth Management Policy Board met on April 4th. We heard from Puget Sound Energy, PSC, on their community solar program, including the installation at the Pine Lake Middle School and what the success of that has been. And we also heard from some local cities, including Sammamish, about their climate planning. The next Growth Management Policy Board meeting will be held on May 2nd, and the agenda has not been released. The King County Affordable Housing Committee also meets next on May 2nd, and the agenda has not been released, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Council President. The next item is the mayor's report, and there will be an executive session this evening to discuss pending or potential litigation per RCW 42.3.110 per N1 per NI and property acquisition per RCW 42.30.110 per N1 per NB. The items are expected to take approximately 30 minutes, and no action is anticipated to follow an open session. On April 6th, the city celebrated Arbor Day at Confluence Park. This was our final planting event of the season, and together with the community, we planted 85 native trees and shrubs. We also spread 25 yards of wood chips and removed invasive ivy and blackberry weed. Arbor Day is the culmination of the planting season, and this season, the city planted 2,501 trees in 15 different parks and open spaces. The city of Issaquah has been recognized as a Tree City USA community for the 31st straight year. On April 10th, I participated in the Washington State Department of Transportation listening session with other regional agencies. We discussed projects along the Interstate 90 and State Route 18 corridor that are in both the design and construction phases. Among other things, we discussed plans to minimize the disruption to local communities and businesses and freight, and to prioritize safety. I look forward to continuing the conversation with local leaders this summer. And on tonight's consent calendar, AB 8813 outlines my appointments to open and expiring seats on our boards and commissions. Consistent with council policy, these appointments allow a broad array of community participation. We have 110 current members across our 12 boards and commissions. This recruitment welcomes 22 new members and 24 returning members. I want to make sure to thank all who applied to serve, those that were appointed, and those that are departing from our boards and commissions. The recommendations that came forward from the interview panels was no easy task due to the highly competitive applicant pool. Again, I wish to thank all those who participated and their willingness to serve our community. Nominations are open for the Issaquah Hall of Fame Award. This is a top honor for making a lasting contribution to our community. This award shall go to someone who's made a significant impact on the Issaquah community over the course of their career. Each year, the mayor and council president select a person to induct into the Issaquah Hall of Fame for their exemplary record of inspiration, leadership, and service. The award will be presented at the Chamber of Commerce annual Issaquah Community Awards event on May 21st. Nominations can be submitted at issaquah.gov/nominate. And the deadlines for nominations is 5 p.m. April 21st. There's some upcoming events. In many countries, Children's Day celebrations are held during the spring and the summer. In Issaquah, the Latino Circle is offering this year again a free and fun events for families of all backgrounds. The event will be on April 28th at 1 p.m. at the Issaquah Community Center. The first 150 families will be able to create a paper mache piggy bank to take home. There will also be games, piñata, and snacks for all ages. For more information, please visit the website issaquah.gov. And lastly, Issaquah is offering an environmental leadership training series between April and July of 2024. Trainings will be led by Issaquah Civic Spark Fellow, Nick Horn. They will be 1 to 2 times monthly from April through July. Following the training series, team leaders will have the opportunity to gather groups of community members to work together and learn and inspire community climate action. And there's more information for that event as well on our issaquah.gov website. And that concludes the mayor's report. We're going to move on to good of the order. Do any council members have anything for good of the order? Council President.
Thank you. I wanted to note first that we received 2 informational items in tonight's consent agenda, and I just wanted to highlight those. The first is our traditional capital projects quarterly update, but then we had a new report out, and it was the first comprehensive set of board and commission work plans. And so your council leadership just wanted to make sure to highlight that to you. It's really great to see the administration taking that step forward. We want to make sure that you get a chance to read it and understand that this really is a big step forward for the boards and commissions to really finalize some of the things that they're working on and kind of having that intent going forward. And then also on our consent agenda was this year's appointments to the board and commissions. So exciting as somebody who came up from one of those. So I wanted to, first of all, welcome all of those members, those who are renewing and those who are new. And then also to highlight to the council members that in the next few days, you'll be receiving an email from your council leadership with signups so that we can go and visit once again. So look for that. It's a tradition we're continuing. Even though we're out of virtual scenarios, it's still been a really nice way to welcome our new boards and commissions and to reaffirm our commitment to how great of advice we get from our boards and commissions, and just take a moment to thank them. So look for that email and your ability to sign up. Thank you.
Any other good of the order items? Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Saturday the 13th, I was in Lake Sammamish State Park. My son was fishing there, and I noticed that there were some canoes on the water, and I went over to talk to the Snoqualmie tribe. They had begun practice for their summer journey, and this was the first time that rowers were on the water under the guidance of council elders and elders in the tribe. That's all a great story, but the real message is I had a chance to talk to two tribal council members, and they both spoke highly of the city government to tribal government relationship that's been built by the mayor and the monthly meetings that have been going on. I just want to highlight those and thank the mayor for continuing that as we look to outreach to the tribes and consult with them on numerous issues of cultural and historic significance for this area, and the artistic issues and the artistic elements that they bring to many of our areas, such as the salmon hatchery and a major art project that will be coming this next year through the Arts Commission. So thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Just wanted to pass that on. Oh, they're practicing every Saturday at 10 in the morning if you want to stop by.
Nice. Thank you, Councilmember Joe. And just to let you know, Councilmember DeMichelle is going to be joining the tribal city coffee meetups that we have as well. So more connections, more different ways. It's great. Any other good of the order items? Okay, thank you. Just a couple upcoming meetings. April 25th, there's a joint meeting with the Issaquah School Board occurring at 5 at the School District Administration Building at 5150 220th Avenue Southeast. The agenda is being finalized. April 29th, Committee of the Whole. The anticipated agenda items include facility options and revenue options. And the next regular City Council meeting is May 6th. So as mentioned earlier, we will be having an executive session to discuss pending or potential litigation per RCW 42.30.110 paren 1 paren I, and property acquisition per RCW 42.30.110 paren 1 paren B. The items are expected to take approximately 30 minutes. No action is anticipated to follow an open session. Open session or executive sessions are closed to the public, and we will now recess in at 8:41 and take a 5-minute break before we gather.